I was rinsing out my mug when I heard the basement door creak open behind me. Milo didn't speak. Not at first. I turned expecting a smile or maybe a joke about the old furnace, but what I saw made my stomach twist. His face had drained of color, lips pressed, thin eyes wide, like he'd seen something that didn't belong to this world. "Grandma?" he said, voice low, sharp and urgent. "Pack your bag. We're leaving. Right now." I blinked. "What, Milo, what are you? Please? Don't call your son. Don't ask. Just trust me." He was already walking past me toward the door hands, shaking as he reached for my purse. "Grab whatever you need. We have to go." The back of my neck prickled. I looked down at my slippers, still damp from watering the porch plants. My mug clinked against the sink as I set it down. He was serious. I didn't argue. I walked to the bedroom and threw a few things into a small overnight bag. My medication, my wallet, a pair of shoes. I glanced at the framed photo of Clay on my nightstand, but didn't take it. When I stepped back into the kitchen, Milo was holding the truck keys, eyes scanning the window. "They're not here yet," he muttered. "Let's go." We didn't speak in the truck. Not for miles. My phone buzzed in my lap. Nathan's name again and again. I didn't answer. Milo reached over and flipped it, face down. The further we drove, the colder the air inside the cab felt, even with the heater on. I glanced at my grandson, his jaw clenched, both hands gripping the steering wheel tight. 2 weeks earlier, I woke to the same dull throb behind my eyes, a pressure that made the ceiling swim if I moved too fast. My stomach turned before I even sat up. I pressed a hand to my forehead, waiting for the room to steady. It didn't. I reached for the edge of the nightstand, fingers brushing the cool wood Clay had carved decades ago. The journal was still there. I flipped to the newest page, scrawled the date, and wrote the same 3 words I'd written all week: headache, dizzy, nausea. I left the coffee part blank. I hadn't been able to drink it for 3 days now. Even the smell made me sick. The kitchen was cold that morning, colder than usual. I turned on the kettle out of habit, but didn't bother preparing a cup. Instead, I sat down at the table and stared at the wallpaper I'd been meaning to strip for years. The silence in the house was thick. Not peaceful, just still. When Nathan came by later that day, I told him about the symptoms. Again. He smiled in that distracted way of his, more math than warmth, and said he'd check the detector. "It's probably just the season changing," he offered, walking into my bedroom and pressing the test button. It beeped sharp and loud. "See, it's fine." He made it sound like I was imagining things, like aging itself was a hallucination. He kissed my cheek, told me to get some rest, and left with his usual rushed goodbye. I sat in my chair by the window for nearly an hour afterward, rubbing my temples and wondering if he was right. But later that evening, when I lay back in bed and felt the headache come roaring back with the furnace's first hum of heat, I wasn't so sure. I closed my eyes and waited for it to pass the way I always did. That night, I left the bedroom door open. I don't know why. Maybe part of me already knew something wasn't right. Milo showed up unannounced, that Saturday morning, toolbox in one hand, a paint-streaked rag tucked into his back pocket. I was still in my robe, hair, pinned up slippers dragging along the floor. "I thought I'd finally fix that back step," he said, "before someone sues you for a broken hip." I smiled and let him in. The kettle was already warming, though I still couldn't stomach coffee. We sat in the kitchen for a minute, catching up. He asked how I'd been feeling. I gave a non-committal shrug. He looked at me a little too long, like he already knew. "You've lost weight," he said. I waved it off. "My appetite comes and goes." He stood and glanced toward the hallway. "You said something about cracks in your wall." I led him to the bedroom and pointed to the hairline fractures creeping above the window frame. They hadn't been there a few months ago. He walked closer, tracing a finger along the crack. "That's not from settling. The pattern's wrong. Your dad said the same thing before he patched the vents. He called them old house quirks. Milo turned, then studying the room. His eyes moved slowly, corners, trim, baseboards. He stepped to the far wall and crouched, running a hand along the heating vent. "This paint's new," he muttered. "Still smells like it." I said nothing. He peeled at the edge of the metal grate, gently squinting. "He sealed these off. All of them," I replied. "Said it was for energy efficiency." Milo stood and looked at me with something caught between concern and disbelief. I thought my dad worked with engines, not home insulation. He said the house was losing heat, that it was just temporary. Milo glanced toward the hallway. "Do you mind if I check the basement?" His tone was too careful now. He didn't wait for my answer. I followed him halfway down the stairs before the cold hit me. He moved ahead, flipping on the light, already searching. The smell of drywall dust was thick in the air, and for the first time, I noticed it had been there for weeks. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, one hand on the banister, the other gripping the railing, like I might need to hold myself upright. Milo's footsteps echoed below me, at first measured steady, familiar. Then they stopped. Minutes passed. I called his name once quietly. No answer. Only the low hum of the furnace kicking on again, a sound I'd lived with for decades, suddenly sharp and foreign. The silence stretched too long. Then finally, I heard the creak of the basement steps. He was coming back, but slower this time. Heavy, like he was carrying something, but all I saw in his hand was his phone. His face was unreadable. Calm, but not really. He didn't meet my eyes. He simply held the phone out toward me and said, "I need you to see this." On the screen was a photo, pipes, wires, a small metal box fastened to one of the gas lines. It looked clean, newly installed. Nothing I recognized. It was directly under the floorboards of my bedroom. "What am I looking at?" I asked. He zoomed in on the box. "This is a timed valve. It releases gas in measured amounts when the furnace turns on. It's not a leak. It's designed." I shook my head. "That can't be right. It's engineered. Clean work. Not slapped together. Someone planned this." I stared at the image again. The valve, the wires, the neat bends of copper tubing. Who would even know how to do that? Milo's voice dropped to a whisper. "Grandma, this isn't an accident." I felt myself sit before I realized I'd moved. My knees had given out. The kitchen chair caught me just in time. He sat across from me, hands still trembling. I couldn't form the words, not yet. My mind clung to something safer, something smaller. It was under my room. He nodded, directly. I looked around the kitchen Clay built with his hands. Every nail, every tile meant to keep us safe. And suddenly, none of it did. Milo reached into his jacket and pulled out a screwdriver. "I need to check your bedroom walls." Milo's words echoed long after he went back upstairs to check the vents. I sat frozen at the kitchen table, staring at the photo he'd shown me, the neat coils of wire and metal that now lived somewhere under my floor. It didn't feel real. It couldn't be. But then my mind went back to the smell of paint, the sound of Nathan's toolbox, the way he'd hummed while working. It was only a month ago. He'd come over on a Sunday, said he wanted to modernize the wiring and check the outlets before winter. He'd brought his own drills, his own ladder. I'd baked muffins that morning, still warm when he walked in. I remember handing him a plate and how he smiled at me the way he always had. Warm, confident, patient. The kind of smile that made a mother proud. He spent the afternoon moving room to room. Said he'd reseal the vents too. Keeps the drafts out, he told me, as he pried the grates off with his screwdriver. I didn't question him. Why would I? He'd always been good with his hands, just like his father. He'd even tested the carbon monoxide detector before he left, pressing the button until it beeped. Good as new, he said, setting his gloves down on the counter. You'll be safe here, Mom. I'd thanked him, hugged him. He'd smelled faintly of metal and detergent. He asked about my bills if I needed help managing them now that the property taxes had gone up. I'd laughed and told him I was fine, but his voice softened. Let me take care of it. You've done enough. Now my hands trembled just thinking about it. Every moment I'd thought was care. Every fix, every gesture suddenly felt like a performance. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Upstairs, I heard the faint scrape of metal. Milo was still working careful, methodical, just like his father once was. Only now, I wasn't sure what careful meant anymore. The motel Milo chose sat behind a gas station on the edge of town, one of those no-questions-asked places with faded curtains and a buzzing neon sign that made the parking lot glow faint red. He paid cash at the front desk. Didn't use his name, didn't use mine either. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. But the deadbolt worked, and for now, that was enough. We didn't speak much until we were seated at the diner next door. The waitress didn't look twice at us, just poured 2 cups of coffee and left the pot behind. I wrapped my hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth, but didn't drink. Milo pulled out his phone and laid it flat on the table. His voice was low and steady. I didn't want to believe it either, he said, but I started putting things together a few weeks ago. He told me about the second mortgage, the missed payments, the notice from the bank he'd spotted on the kitchen counter when he stopped by Nathan's house unannounced. He told me about the severance packages being handed out at his father's company, and how Nathan hadn't mentioned a word of it, not even to me. He's scared, Grandma Milo said. He's in deep. And your house, it's worth close to 900 grand now. I stared at the scratched surface of the table, the way the edge had worn down to a soft curve from years of elbows and coffee mugs. If something happens to you, he continued, the estate splits. Half to Dad, half to Aunt Jessica. No questions, no police report, just grief and a real estate agent. I swallowed hard. The air felt thinner here. He didn't want to hurt you, not with his hands. That's not the kind of man he is. But he planned this. The system in the basement, the detector, the sealed vents. It was meant to happen slowly, quietly, like you just faded. The waitress passed by. I nodded politely, not really seeing her. Milo reached for his cup, but didn't drink either. He didn't want to watch it, just benefit from it. I kept my eyes on the window where the highway lights bled into the dark. The next morning, the motel room felt smaller. I hadn't slept. Every sound from the parking lot doors closing, engines starting, made me jump. Milo stood by the window scanning the lot before turning to me. I have to go back, he said. No, I answered too quickly. You can't. The journal, Grandma. The one you've been writing in. It's proof, your symptoms, the timeline, everything. The police will need it. I looked at my bag in the corner. I'd left the journal on my nightstand. I hadn't even thought about it when we left. Then I'll come with you. He shook his head. If they see your car or you, they'll panic. I'll be careful. Before I could argue again, he was gone. The next 40 minutes stretched like hours. I walked the length of the room again and again, trying to listen, past the hum of the air conditioner. The coffee I'd made sat untouched on the counter, growing cold. I thought about Nathan, as a little boy barefoot, on the back lawn, holding up a birdhouse he'd built with clay. His grin was wide and proud. I held that memory because the other image, the one Milo's words painted, was too much. When I finally heard tires on gravel outside, I ran to the window. He was holding the journal, but his face was drained. Grandma, he said. Breath-catching, I heard them. I took a step closer. Who? He swallowed hard. Your son said, if the police see this, we're finished. And Aunt Jessica said, she's calling every hotel in the area. They know we left. They're looking. The room went silent again, heavier this time. Milo dropped the journal on the table and locked the door behind him. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew staying here was no longer an option. The knock was gentle at first, almost polite. Mom Nathan's voice came through the door. "I know you're in there. Open up. Let's talk." I froze. Milo was already reaching for the journal on the table. "Nathan," I whispered, but he shook his head. Another knock. Firmer. "Come on, Mom. Don't let Milo scare you. He's confused. You're not well. You've been sick. Remember." Milo moved to the bathroom and opened the door at the back of the room, a second exit hidden until now. "We have to go. Right now." The knocks turned to pounding. "Mom, you're making this worse. Open the door." Milo grabbed my hand and pulled me into the back hallway. We ran the old emergency stairs rattling beneath us. I could barely keep up one hand clutching the rail, the other gripping his. My heart thundered, not just from fear, but from betrayal. We burst through the bottom door into the alley and stopped. Jessica stood at one end near the dumpsters. Arms crossed, face pale and cold. Kelly, Nathan's wife, stood at the other near the back fence. Her eyes looked wild, and then Nathan stepped around the corner. He was holding a tire iron. Jessica pulled something from her coat pocket. A syringe. "This has gone too far," Nathan said. "You don't understand what you're doing. You're confused," Mom Jessica added. "This will help you calm down." Milo stepped in front of me, shielding my body with his. His voice was shaking, but loud. "Stay back." Kelly looked at me with tears in her eyes. "We didn't want this, but you left us no choice." I couldn't move. I just stared. At my son, my daughter, my daughter-in-law. All of them blocking the exits. All of them looking me in the eye and choosing the money anyway. Milo tensed beside me. And then, from the far end of the alley, came the sound of screeching tires. A second later, sirens. The alley exploded with red and blue light. Police cars blocked both ends in seconds. Doors flew open, guns drawn, shouting. "Drop the weapon," an officer yelled. Jessica froze, syringe still in her hand. Kelly stumbled backward with her arms up. Nathan didn't move right away, not until the officer repeated himself. Then he dropped the tire iron with a clatter. Milo raised his hands too slowly, keeping himself between me and the rest of them. His phone was still in his pocket line, open the dispatcher, hearing everything. Officers surrounded us, barking orders. One reached Jessica. First kicked the syringe away and cuffed her wrists behind her back. Another led Kelly toward the fence, her face streaked with silent tears. Nathan didn't fight. He just stared at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. A sergeant stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" I shook my head. "No. My grandson, he protected me." They patted Milo down. Found the phone, confirmed the recording. "We have it all," the officer said. Everything they said. One officer began repeating Miranda rights. Another began photographing the tire iron, the syringe, the alley. And then there it was again. "Old people die," Kelly had said moments earlier. "You've lived your life," Jessica added, as if that justified it. I heard those words again in my mind, the way they'd said them, steady, resolved. But Milo had stood between them and me, unshaken. Not just because I was his grandmother, but because it was right. They led my children away in handcuffs into separate vehicles. Nathan didn't look back. Jessica tried. I didn't meet her eyes. Milo stood beside me as the last car pulled away, hand on my shoulder. Quiet and steady. "Why did you stay with me?" I asked. He looked down at me, still breathing hard. "Because he would have. Clay. That's who he meant. The man who built our home. The one who taught Milo to build things that lasted. This moment of protection was what lasted." The officer turned to us. "We'll need statements." Milo nodded. "We're ready." 3 months passed. The court process moved faster than I expected. There was too much evidence, photos, recordings, my journal, Milo's testimony. They all took deals. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to hear the years read aloud. That wasn't the part I wanted to carry. Instead, I packed what mattered. Milo handled the real estate agent, the showings, the paperwork. He talked to the appraiser who said the house might go for over 900. It sold in less than a week. But before the final signing, Milo pulled his truck into the driveway one last time. I waited inside, out of sight, while he carried out each cabinet Clay had built, the oak ones, with the dovetail joints still strong after 40 years. He'd removed them cleanly, left the kitchen, looking bare but whole. I got permission, he said. They'll let me install them at your new place. My apartment was small, just 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, but it had a view of the street below and a little balcony where the light poured in just right at midday. Milo brought tools, set up drop cloths, and worked for hours. I sat in the corner with tea watching. When he finished, the cabinets hung flush along the wall level, secure, perfect. I reached out and touched one. The wood felt cool and smooth the way it had in Clay's hands. They look like they've always been here, I said. They're meant to last, Milo replied. Later that week, he brought someone new to dinner. Sophie, he said. She works with wood and clay, builds sculptures the size of furniture. Smarter than me, probably stronger too. She smiled at me with kind eyes and calloused fingers. While they did dishes, I sat at the little table tracing the grain of the oak, breathing in the soft quiet of a home that hadn't yet been broken. I hadn't gone back to the old house. I didn't need to. Clay's work was here. And so was Milo.